All right, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you're local, come hang out with us one Sunday morning. Our service starts at 10:30. If you're not local but looking for a good church to check out online, we live stream our service. Calvary316.live is the quick link to our YouTube channel, or you can go to facebook.com/Calvary316. You can watch our service there as well. I'm joined in studio by the man that needs no introduction, Pope Creighton Vaughn. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing well. How is everyone out there?
The Army Green Outlaw.
Yeah. This is a good one.
Shirt. That's a good shirt.
I'm pretty sure this is one of one.
It is. This is. What are you doing, buddy?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. So your shirt, it's totally fitting. So what does it say? Love thy Karen. Love thy Karen. and you always say that you have your favorite Karen.
Of course, my mama
is your mama.
Yep.
But your second favorite Karen is a lady that goes to our church, correct?
Uh-huh.
And I got a text message from your second favorite Karen, and
who is also an avid listener or fan of the show.
Absolutely, she's a fan. She's a dear saint, and PhD, which is actually pretty awesome. But she sent me a text just about an hour ago, and said that she's 33 years sober today. And that's pretty awesome. And so we want to just kind of start out. You didn't even know this. You wore a shirt, Love Thy Karen, and our second favorite Karen, your second favorite Karen, is celebrating a wonderful milestone.
For the record, we're completely off the internet right now. We completely went down.
We're not live at all.
No.
Well, let's keep going. Yeah. Anyway,
keep going.
Okay, now we're back.
Yeah, so
are we on the internet? Are we live? What's happening, Creighton?
Dude, Vimeo is
what's happening?
I don't know. Hold on.
Is the ship running? This will sound really interesting to the podcast.
So I really hate the term calling somebody like a
Karen.
A Karen, but mostly because my mom.
Right, your mom's Karen.
Which she can be a Karen, but it's just like but like that kind of, I guess this is a nicer way of saying calling a woman a different than calling them a different name, but at the same time, it's like calling them a different name.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're back on.
We're back on.
I don't know what happened.
Right. And
we don't know what happened. The interwebs.
And I don't know where that came from, because most of the women that I know that are named Karen are really nice ladies, and I don't
like the whole.
Like that.
She's a Karen.
It originated from the lady in the park. The gentlemen were fishing in a park, and they were grilling their fish on the park provided grill, and this lady came up and called the cops on them because she could smell their fish. And when the cops got there, they ended up arresting that lady, and her name was Karen.
Oh,
that's
so
where
one Karen ruined it for everyone.
Yes.
And by the way, also welcome in the studio, Vinny Himes. How you doing, my friend?
Happy to be here.
You jumped right in there. I love it. So, I don't really like the Karen thing, but I think we can all agree that calling a guy a Chad is that's appropriate.
That's okay.
I mean, we know one, right? And
a couple.
Yeah, but we actually do love our Chad.
Well, he does have a ponytail.
He does that.
That does
kind of fit within Justin's theory about man buns.
Never trust a man with a ponytail.
Yeah. So
Chad, if you're listening, I respect you, but I will never trust you until you get rid of it.
So Creighton, explain to the audience kind of how this dysfunctional show works. Are we online?
We are online.
Okay, so we're good.
We dropped down to nothing for 30 seconds. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the internet or Vimeo. The internet's full of the ghosts of the machine. But
Global
we
warming.
are currently live.
Goblins.
The way the show works is that I, Pope Creighton, will provide a topic.
I, Pope Creighton.
God wills it.
I just got a text from John. He thought it was his hotel Wi-Fi. It's not your Wi-Fi, John. It
could be. John's Wi-Fi took us down.
So anyway, the way the show works is I will present a topic to the room. Zach will turn that topic into a Bible study. Sometimes it is just a straight Bible passage. Sometimes it is a topic that I find interesting or weird that has to do with the Bible or has to do with current events and Christianity in general. If you would like to be a part of the conversation, you can leave a comment on either YouTube or Facebook. I am watching both of those currently. Or you can text Zach directly at 678-438-9202. Or you can email us at popecreighton@gmail.com. That's Pope, P-O-P-E, Creighton, C-R-E-I-G-H-T-O-N @gmail.com.
I did
So that's
see.
it.
Did you get the forwarded email that came in? I forwarded it to you. We got an email from our brother Tom, and he had this long diatribe about jazz music. I'm not sure.
Yes, I did see that, and I was
At some point, read it, and if it's
surprised.
relevant, let's bring it up. But our buddy John is watching from North Carolina, and hope your travels were good. Can't wait for you to get home. And so, Creighton, what are we talking about tonight?
That is a good question. Give me just a second. Jennifer says hello.
Okay, that's great, Jennifer. Great to hear from you. By the way, programming note: next Wednesday will be the last episode of Outlaw Radio before our summer break. We'll be taking June and July off. We might come back late July. We'll see how the schedule plays out. But next Wednesday will be the last episode of kind of the cycle. Also happens to be one of those unique Wednesdays that it'll be my 41st birthday.
Is that really next week? Happy birthday.
May 29th. It's not my birthday yet, but so you can't say happy
around your
birthday
birthday.
now. It's not my birthday.
I should know when that is, and I don't.
Yeah. So 41, which is nuts. I'm
you're
old.
old.
I know.
Yes, you are old.
I know. I'm old. So let's transition this ship some direction, Creighton.
Yes. So,
hold on. Before we get
you have
started,
something, Justin?
Before we get started.
we're jumping right into Creighton's topic.
I know, isn't that crazy?
This is a
it
first.
It is.
I know. Well, we got rid of Isaac, and now things have really settled
Got
in.
rid of?
Settled in.
Well,
now.
in honor of Isaac, I would like to remind everybody of what we're talking about and say something about feet pics.
We're not talking about any of that. So, Creighton, what's the topic?
Yes. So, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about today, and I couldn't think of anything specific in terms of like something crazy that's going on that we haven't discussed yet. So I decided to go with let's go with an interesting Bible story that I think doesn't get enough talked about in depth, because this is one of those things where most people, especially people who grew up in the church, probably know this story. But I'm sure there's more to it than what we see on like the felt boards or the
Zacchaeus
Sunday
being
school
in the
thing.
tree.
What?
Zacchaeus in the
That's
tree.
a good
No,
story.
but that's a good one.
It's a good story.
I want to do
Zacchaeus
Elijah.
was a wee little
He was a
man.
little wee little
I want to
man.
do Elijah and the Prophets of Baal.
Okay.
Oh, that's one of my
it's-
favorites.
It's a good one.
Okay,
it's
so
First Kings,
First
chapter
Kings.
18. The actual story starts in, I think, verse 20. Or at least the Prophets of Baal part of the story starts in verse 20. You might want to start at verse 1, as that gives a lot of context as to what's going on in the life of Elijah.
Don't
and
skip
Israel.
over some of the burners of the like insults that he does. They're great.
Burners indeed.
Yeah.
Burners indeed, sir.
It's one of my favorites because you don't get that kind of sarcasm out of anywhere else in the Bible, really. And
I love the Old Testament, because the Old Testament, I think people see it as just genealogies and law, and the Old Testament has some great stories.
Well, that's when God was still working actively among the people. Like, that's the best part about it.
Yes.
Like, we just lose that in the New Testament. You know, it's just.
I mean, God doesn't do anything in the New Testament.
Right? No, it's
It's completely absent from the story.
it's
That
like
Jesus guy, and
the
the Holy
Old
Spirit.
Testament-
really takes the stage.
No.
Yeah, but in the Old Testament, he's like actually coming down and like talking to people and stuff.
Like,
you know,
forget about Jesus performing miracles, coming down and doing stuff.
my favorite part about this story is the insults. Like,
it would be.
it's so great.
I think, Vinny, where you're going, or trying to go, is how God interacts with humanity in a very different way.
Yes,
in
like,
the Old Testament, as
Like-
opposed to the way that Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
I
like
think that's
God
what you're
came
saying.
down and walked through the garden with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
We don't get that in the New Testament.
Well,
we don't get
okay,
that
he
in
does
the
walk
Old.
through the
Again,
Garden
Jesus.
of Gethsemane,
Right.
And God does walk around a lot,
like
in
for
the Gospels.
33 years,
Yeah.
he's walking around. But
But
this,
I get what you're saying, like in the sense of like,
We just lost that. Like it stopped. Like
but this story in particular, like one of my favorite things to watch on like YouTube is called like epic rap battles of history. And this is basically one giant rap battle. And I hope that one day somebody will do that for this story in the Bible.
I'm sure it's probably been done. Have you really looked for it?
I haven't, but this will be a deep dark search for me tonight.
It's coming.
Justin's getting no sleep.
It's
Well,
coming.
that happens often.
So,
I
Craig,
go down so many YouTube black holes.
It's just a story. You just want to kind of unpack the story, look at the story. Is there a particular angle that you're interested in, or we're just Zach? Make this a Bible study. Let's rock and roll.
Make this a Bible study. Let's rock and roll like it's Sunday school, but we're adults.
It's Sunday school, but we're
Yes,
adults.
exactly.
and
It's a great story to make a Bible study out of.
It's Sunday school, and we're adults, and the Sunday school teacher has no idea the passage he was going to be teaching on that day.
Yes.
Man, we just need a felt board. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I will say, so I've really enjoyed teaching through the life of Peter, you know, and just the ability to kind of like jump around, put some things together thematically before we get to 1st and 2nd Peter. And you know, you'll encounter Damian Kyle, interestingly enough, several years ago did he took the Gospels and he did, I forget what he called it, but he did a harmony of the Gospels study. So it was like, I think 4 years it took him to do type of a thing. But he harmonized the life of Jesus and just kind of just did a whole chronological study of the life of Jesus,
That's
jumping around. And I've enjoyed Peter because we've been able to jump all over the place. We're a little bit Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, you know, etc. I'll tell you what I don't want to get the cart before the horse, but where I'm kind of like maybe thinking about landing after all of this, after we get done with Peter, is so, you know, you've got 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Those are the histories, right? And 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings cover the history, and then 1st and 2nd Chronicles repeat the history, but they do so from the perspective of God. This is Ezra writing the histories. This is what God wanted the people to remember as they're returning to the land. I thought what would be really cool is to do a harmony of the histories and like study the histories, but harmonize with 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Would be kind of interesting.
I love that idea.
Do I feel like a timeline coming up on stage? Like that one, what's that one like TV pastor that does that kind of,
Andy Perez that brings up the big.
Well, Andy, yes, obviously.
Yeah, the big
but
timeline.
Like, no, there's a guy on like TBN that does like for the end time stuff. He does like big, like timeline
I have
kind of stuff.
no idea.
I don't know. I haven't watched TBN since they had Bible Man on it.
Good old Bible man. The anyway, so I again we're getting into the Old Testament, the histories. Again, I think you're right, Creighton. Stories that that don't get enough press, right? And this is a great story, a great story. Now, I'm looking at this, and it's like, how much of the story do we want to read? I think we read it all.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, we'll dive in. I'm going to work on making this a Bible study. Spice, Vinny, you guys, your job is to ask questions at any point. Bring in your own observations, comments. You have it's completely open. Whenever you need to jump in. I'm just going to kind of start working through this, so I don't want to dominate it. So you guys got to interject when you feel like.
Don't worry, I will.
Thank you. Yeah, I know you will. I know you will, Spice Daddy. All
That's
right,
what
so
I'm here. I'm here to spice things up a bit.
there you go. So we're 1 Kings chapter 18. We'll start with verse 1. It came to pass, after many days, that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. Now, Ahab at the time is the king of Israel. He is a wicked king. Elijah, again, we're kind of getting a cold running jump into this. Elijah is one of the prophets of God. He's kind of a central prophet. In fact, if the law gets summarized under the character of Moses representing the law, Elijah represents the prophet. So you have Elijah the prophet. The word of the Lord came to Elijah, tells Elijah to go to King Ahab and to let Ahab know that God's going to send rain on the earth. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab, and there was a severe famine in Samaria. So news of rain would be good if there is a famine. And Ahab called Obadiah, who was in charge of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For so it was, while Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and had fed them with bread and water. Jezebel, by the way, is the queen. She's married to Ahab. She's a wicked lady. Queen Jezebel. In fact, in kind of cultural lexicon, to be a Jezebel has a very negative connotation.
It's a very good example of being, what they call that, equally yoked.
Yes, she's a wicked lady. She's
Ahab
a pagan.
was not equally yoked.
Yes. You could say to tie thoughts together that Jezebel would have been the original Karen.
Like he met her on Tinder kind of thing.
Right. So you've got Ahab, who's the king, wicked king, Jezebel, who's a wicked queen. You have Elijah the prophet. You have this guy Obadiah, who's in charge of the house of Ahab. But he fears the Lord. While Jezebel was massacring the prophets of God, Obadiah went out of his way to hide, to preserve the lives of many. Again, just some backstory here. And Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go into the land, to all the springs of water, to the brooks. Perhaps you may find grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so that we will not have to kill any of the livestock." This is a result of the famine. So they divided the land between them to explore. Ahab went one way by himself. Obadiah went the other way by himself. Now as Obadiah went on his way, suddenly Elijah met him. And he recognized him and fell on his face and said, "It is you, my Lord Elijah." So this is Obadiah recognizing Elijah as being the prophet of the Lord. And he answered, he said, "It is I. Go tell your master Elijah is here." So Obadiah said, "How have I sinned that you are delivering your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to hunt for you." And when they said, "He is not here," he took an oath from the kingdom or nation that they could not find you. And now you say, "Go tell your master Elijah is here." And it shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from you, that the Spirit of the Lord will carry you to a place that I do not know. And when I go and tell Ahab, and he cannot find you, he will kill me. But I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. So what Ahab's saying,
snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches. So Obadiah here, Elijah comes to him, is like, "Hey, let Ahab know I have a message for him." And Obadiah's like, "Wait a second. If I go, I'll tell Ahab I know where Elijah is. There's a bounty on your head. I'll bring him to where you're supposed to be, but you will have fled so that I'm not able to fulfill what I've said, and he's going to kill me." So Ahab's really worried about the dynamic. Verse 13 says, was it not reported to my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, and fed them bread and water. And now you say, "Go tell your master Elijah's here. He's going to kill me." And Elijah said, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely present myself to him today." So Elijah dispels, "I'm not going anywhere. You go get Ahab. I need to talk to him. I have a message for him." So Obadiah went and met Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. And it happened when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said to him, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" And he answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have. And that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and have followed after Baals." Now, I want to pause. I'm going to pronounce this Baals, Baals. It is
Baal.
It is Baal. That is how it's pronounced, but I grew up Southern, and we call them Baal. It's Baal. So I do know I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's Baal, but I grew up pronouncing it Baal, so it's the Baals.
I cringe every time you go through these names.
You know what?
And
You did give me a compliment though that I did better than Andy.
there was one study you did where you did pretty well, but the vast majority of them, I sit there and I
Spice
cringe.
Daddy, you know what?
And
We're
Do you
moving
even
on.
have any friends?
no, I don't.
They're all in this room.
So Elijah,
Pretty much.
some of them are. So Elijah answered, I have not troubled Israel but you and your father's house. He says, now therefore send and gather all Israel to me on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Ashtoreth, and who eat at Jezebel's table. So
Hey,
Jezebel,
You
yes.
pronounce Carmel correctly too.
See,
Thank you.
you see, you know,
Caramel.
Mount Carmel, Mount Caramel.
See, that just sounds like a Candyland kind of thing.
I love it. Are you telling me you don't like that? Mount
I
Caramel?
love caramel, but
Caramel?
like when you say
Caramel.
when it's not pronounced correctly of the actual mountain, it does.
So here we have a dynamic. Elijah's given a message from God to deliver to Ahab, who's a wicked king. His wife is a dangerous woman. People are afraid of her. She's killed the prophets of the Lord. She's hunted them down. Obadiah had to hide and preserve the lives of 100 of them. Ahab comes to Elijah, troubler of Israel. And Elijah doesn't back down. No. Let's get this right. It's you. It's your household. It's this woman. You've brought an idolatry into the land. You've forsaken the commandments of God. You've been worshiping false gods and idols, the Baals, the Ashtoreths. So Elijah's like, you bring all these prophets of these false gods that you're buddies with. Bring them to Mount Carmel. And we're going to have a bit of a showdown, an epic rap battle, so to speak. So Ahab sent for all of the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. And Elijah came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. But the people answered him not a word. Then Elijah said to the people, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Therefore, let them give us 2 bulls. And let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire under it. I will prepare the other bull. I will lay it on the wood, but put no fire under it. Then you call on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, well, he is God. So all the people answered and said, it is well spoken. So, the dynamic here. The children of Israel are caught between 2 opinions. Their leaders are leading them down a path of idolatry. Elijah, the prophets of God, are standing up for the truth. They're speaking truth to power. They're the remnant. And then there's this convergence. You have Elijah standing alone. You have 450 prophets of Baal. And Elijah presents a simple test. Hey, let's see whose God's real. Whose God's powerful. Whose God is authoritative. Whose God you should follow. And so the test we'll put is we'll take 2 bulls. Prophets of Baal, you can have a bull, and I'll have a bull. You guys build an altar, I'll build an altar. You guys cut up the bull, put the pieces of the carcass. You guys you're preparing a burnt offering. I'll do the same. The catch, though, is that we'll both prep the altars. We'll prep the altars with a sacrifice. We'll prep the altars ready for a fire. But instead of us lighting the fire, we will wait and see which God will accept the offering. So if it's the God of if Baal, if these gods are real, then the prophets of Baal can pray and cry out, and it will Baal will send fire from heaven. If not, well then we'll see if Jehovah, if the Lord is real. the God that I serve is true. And he'll send down. So there's a very simple litmus test here, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kind of. I see a lot of parallels between this and Moses with the Pharaoh.
That's an interesting observation. How so?
So, like, basically same kind of concept. Like, God had Moses go to the Pharaoh, and, like, the very first one, for example, he said to lay down your staff, and it turned into a snake. And then the magicians of Pharaoh's court did the same thing. Like, I kind of see parallels between this and that situation.
It's an interesting story because, Moses throws down his staff,
Right.
becomes a serpent, and then Pharaoh's like turns to his magicians and like, y'all do the same, dark magic.
Right.
They throw down theirs and they become serpent. They become serpents.
And I don't want to get into the story, but
Yeah.
like that, I'm seeing a lot of parallels between, whose God is real at this point, because
Yeah.
it's the same kind of thing. And in that situation, it was, ultimately.
Well,
God,
I think we see parallels to this all the time. You can go
Right.
back to the time of Daniel, and Daniel's interactions with Nebuchadnezzar, and in the first chapter of Daniel, where let us eat our diet, you guys eat your diet. We'll see who's better. Like, I think that there's something to that in the sense of like, God doesn't have a problem defending himself. I think as Christians sometimes we feel like we carry the burden of defending God for being God. No. Like, God is very good at defending himself. Our job is to represent him, and it's to be his spokesman. Like Elijah is like, hey, I'm gonna put all of this on God. Like God will prove himself. We see patterns of that. Even today, the power of God versus the promised power of false idols or false gods. Hey, the world says that if you do this, that, and the other, it'll satisfy. Okay, go for it. But Jesus says that he'll quench a thirst from the deep well within the soul. So try it out,
now,
right?
With that being said, without getting ahead of the story, do you see parallels of that and the health and wealth kind of church genre of things? Like, do you think they're serving false gods with that, or do you see what I'm saying with that?
I do. Let's maybe hold that thought. Let's let the story unfold a little bit before we get the cart before the horses.
Okay.
So we've got this cook-off. Elijah on his own. The Prophets of Baal, 450 guys. Interesting. I was in Chicago this past weekend, and on our way back to the airport, I wanted to get an authentic deep dish pie, a Chicago pizza, which, by the way, was delicious. It was awesome. Joker's like this thick.
You mean
Like,
bread?
I've
You
never-
mean bread lasagna?
It was unbelievably good. But while we were sitting in this restaurant, on one of the big TVs, they had one of those. It was a Food Network. It was one of those barbecue cook-offs, like competitions. Oh my goodness! Like, I don't know why a pizza joint has barbecue on the TVs. Like, all I wanted was barbecue. But I think of like this is like a barbecue cook-off between Elijah and the Prophets of Baal. You have a bull, I have a bull. We'll cut it up. We'll put it on an altar. We'll get everything ready. Then we'll see whose God's real and whose God will consume the offering. Now, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one bull for yourself and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. So they took the bull, which was given to them. They prepared it. They called on the name of Baal from morning even till noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice. No one answered. Then they leaped about the altar which they had made. So they're dancing around. They're crying out. They're trying to invoke Baal to act and to consume the offering.
So this is obviously taking place in Israel. Are these Hebrew people that have converted and become prophets of Baal, or these like people from Babylon and Assyria that have
Migrated.
there to be, because
That's a great question.
can we give is there a little bit of background on Ahab's wife Jezebel at all?
I don't have a lot of deep background. If you want to take a moment and look up a few things.
So I feel like that's kind of important. Like, are these people that have abandoned God and turned to Baal as prophets, or are they just people from the religion just from the start?
I don't have an answer to that either. So anytime that you would have, okay, so keep in mind like the larger context of what's happening in Israel. When the Hebrew people came back to the land of promise and they entered the land under the leadership of Joshua, they were commanded to conquer, like leave nobody, like take the land. And they didn't. They didn't completely. They left population pockets of foreigners. And these foreigners were not monotheistic. They were pagans, from the Canaanites to Philistines to all Amorites, Amalekites, Perizzites, whoever'ites. There were all kinds of ites throughout the land. And this would be a constant problem. Constant problem all throughout the period of the judges, which comes before the period of the kings. So you get into this, and sometimes it's very hard to differentiate. Like, okay, are the prophets of Baal, are they Jewish or are they non-Jews, Gentiles, exerting influence over the people of Israel? I don't have a solid definitive answer on that. More than likely a combination of both. I think is probably. Now keep in mind, the people are following after these false gods, which is why Elijah's having this whole showdown. Because Elijah's representing God, he's speaking truth. He's trying to defend God, trying to appeal to the people to come back and follow after God. You get to, here's a good example. So Gideon, remember the story of Gideon, book of Judges. Gideon gets called by God. Gideon's a Hebrew. He gets called by God to be a deliverer. God raises him up to be a judge. But what's the first assignment he's given? His first assignment is to go home because his father has like this gigantic Ashtoreth, this foreign god statue, basically operating as a pseudo priest of this foreign god on his property. And it's a Hebrew town, and they're all worshiping this god, and Gideon tears it down. But these are Hebrew people. So, as an example, I think that the prophets of Baal probably are some Gentile, but they're also probably Jewish.
I think we can go back to Jezebel, because Jezebel was not Jewish at all, or Hebrew. In fact,
Was she a Moabite?
She's Phoenician.
Okay, Phoenician.
So basically from Lebanon area.
Okay.
And her name in Hebrew is Jezebel. Actually means "where is the Lord."
Fitting, right?
Yeah. So I think you can bring that to the table of she probably, and you see this in the previous chapters of how she influenced the Hebrew people, of bringing in her people and her beliefs and things like that, which goes back to previous commandments of God.
Yeah, no, Ahab was a wicked king. Should have never married Jezebel. There was compromise. And compromise leads to judgment and leads to consequence. Elijah as a prophet, Jezebel will have a very terrible demise. She will have an end. But Elijah's trying to make a contrast between which God is real and which God is false. Which God has power and which God is name only. So there's a cook-off. And so the prophets of Baal up on Mount Carmel, they've they've built their altar. They've cut up the bull. They've put the bull for 3-4 hours. They're crying out, Baal, hear us, bring down fire, show us your presence. They're dancing around it. They're employing all their religious traditions. And so it was, verse 27, at noon, that Elijah mocked them, which I love this part of the story, because Elijah is laughing at them. He's mocking them. He said, cry aloud, for he is a god. Maybe he's meditating, or he's busy, or on a journey, or perhaps he's sleeping and must be awakened. So these guys are dancing, they're crying out, and Elijah's like, hey guys, you might need to turn up the volume. Your God might be sleeping, he might be meditating. He's mocking them. He's making fun of them. So we're told they cried aloud. And not just cried aloud, but now they get into some perverse stuff. They start to cut themselves, as was their custom, with knives and lances, until the blood gushed out on them. And when midday had passed, the prophets, and when midday was past, they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no voice, no answer, and no one paid attention. So all of this is for naught. They're dancing, they're shouting, they're crying out. Elijah's taunting them. Maybe you should cry out louder. They begin to cut themselves, self-mutilation.
I think one of my favorite insults from Elijah is maybe he's on the toilet.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Or he's busy. That word busy is...
Yeah, so, the ESV says, cry aloud, for he's a god. Either he's amusing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep.
He's on the toilet. He can't hear you guys.
Right.
So Elijah, verse 30, said to all the people, come near to me. So the people came near to him. And he prepared the altar of the Lord that was broken down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench around the altar, large enough to hold 2 sheas of seed. And he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, laid it on the wood. Then he said, fill 4 water pots with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. And he said, do it a second time. They did it a second time. He said, do it a third time. They did it a third time. So the water ran all around the altar and filled the trench with water. So Elijah, after the prophets of Baal have exhausted their resources, they have a bit of egg on their face. There's no movement, no action, no fire, no
Blood
confirmation.
everywhere.
Say what?
Blood everywhere.
And it's a bloody mess. Elijah's like, okay, it's enough's enough. It's my time. And so he builds this altar. There's a lot of symbolism to it. Calls the people together. He cuts up the bull. Puts the bull on the altar. Digs a trench, a trough around. Has them cover it all with water. A second time, cover it with water. Third time, cover it with water.
Don't know if you know this, but fire doesn't work well with water.
No, spice on top of things.
All those years of school, that is one thing I learned, that usually fire does not burn water.
Water is not very conducive. So Elijah is setting up, and keep in mind here, Elijah is setting up a dynamic where undoubtedly, if there's any combustion, fire, it has to be of divine origin. Like, there's no gimmick, there's no sleight of hand. Elijah's like, I'm not David Blaine. I'm not going to pull a fast one over on anyone.
And if there's any firefighters out there on our listening, if they could confirm this by emailing popecreighton@gmail.com. Does fire burn water? That would be very helpful for this conversation.
Spice, you're bringing it tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
So we have this dynamic. Vinny, what are your thoughts here before we get to we're kind of at a cliffhanger?
Man, it's bringing back so many memories, because we used to go over to my aunt and uncle's house, and there's this like 1950s Hollywood used to do Bible story movies, and I watched this on VHS when I was like 8 years old, and I'm rewatching it as you're reading it, and like seeing, like, I'm gonna go home and stay up all night and watch this movie
And watch it again.
It was so great. Like, they did such a good job of the movie, like even to the false prophets cutting themselves and everything. Like, actually getting the visual of it makes the story so much even better. But yeah, I'm like on the edge of my seat. I mean, it's funny how much of a smart aleck he's being.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
Like, I made fun of you. I made fun of your God, and now I'm like soaking my sacrifice and my tinder with water. There's just no way this can possibly work.
You're an outdoorsman. Explain how. Like,
Yeah,
that's,
I mean, I'm even thinking in my head how I would set up the wood, because wood, if you put it vertical, burns hotter and faster. I imagine he's like laying it horizontal just to make fun of the situation. Like if you put a log vertical and stack other logs around it in an almost vertical but angled shape, your fire is going to burn very hot, and that's how you would traditionally set up an altar.
What would water do to that wood if you soak that wood in water?
In that environment, it's a very dry, arid climate, right? So this wood is probably extremely well seasoned.
It's dry to start with.
Super dry. And so wood is literally a sponge. So when I'm trying to dry wood to build a piece of furniture like the super awesome coffee table that I built that you've never seen, I stand my pieces of wood that I want to use for a project against the wall. Like, you go to these lumber yards and they've got everything stacked horizontally. It's the worst thing you can do with wood, because it's a series of straws filled with moisture, and so when you put them vertically, they can naturally evaporate that moisture.
I've been to your wood shop. A lot of the wood, you can see that it's wet at the bottom.
Yes,
because it's where all the water.
So
is
what you're telling me is wet wood does not burn well?
Unbelievably. So I'm envisioning Elijah literally laying these pieces of wood horizontally so that they just will not burn well, and then he soaks them in water, and they're so dry they're going to absorb 100% of that water like a sponge, because that's how wood works. So like,
you can
as
see
you're
him cutting the bowl on the wood too.
yeah, just like getting it soggy and bloody,
Yeah.
and like he's just being a giant smart aleck right now.
So what you're telling me is it would take a long time for, if there were any fire, for that to even catch fire.
It would be almost
burn that
impossible to make this burn.
Okay, I just want to establish that.
Like,
just
you would need a piece of magnesium to be ignited with a acetylene torch and drop that in the middle of this, and you got a chance.
And in my expert opinion as an archaeologist,
not
at
a whole
one
lot of
point,
magnesium.
There was not a magnesium or
Weird.
acetylene torches
Or
back
acetylene.
then.
Weird.
This
But
is just what they were
that's
back then.
that's what it would take
They
to
just
make
hadn't
this
dug one
burn.
up yet, Justin.
Right. You know what? You're right. I'm not saying that they didn't exist. We haven't found one yet.
So we have an archaeologist, an outdoorsman, confirming the impossible nature of this thing
Of
spontaneously combusting, yet alone, even like Elijah at this point, lighting it himself.
You know what? I'm sitting at the edge of my seat for the rest of this story because I don't see a way out for Elijah.
I mean, Elijah has boxed himself in, hasn't he?
He has, totally. And he totally, I mean, he set himself up for failure.
There's vomit on his sweater already.
Right.
I mean, it's a bold strategy, Cotton, you know? Bold move. So let's get to the story.
Let's see how it plays out.
You ready, Justin?
Oh, I'm ready.
Oh, yeah, right
I'm
on.
ready. I don't think it's going to happen, but
What is Elijah going to do? So, verse 36, it came to pass. At the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, which I think is interesting. Like, Elijah waits. So, within the ordinances of God, the Levitical system, the way that the operations of the tabernacle, the temple, were to function, is that the day would begin with a morning sacrifice. A lamb would be slain, and then the day would end with a blood sacrifice. A lamb would be sacrificed to close the day. Every day, morning and evening, there would be this particular sacrifice. And so Elijah waits. He waits for the time of the evening sacrifice. And he comes near and he says, Lord. So he prays, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, or Jacob. Let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Lord God, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again. So he prays his prayer. I imagine between verse 37 and 38, there's a bit of a pause, maybe, because we read, then the fire of the Lord. Well, what the fire of the Lord? What is that?
All I'm thinking about is that Third Day song, All Consuming Fire.
The
what I'm
fire of
talking
the
about?
Lord. I do.
Oh, yeah.
Fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench.
So what you're telling me is not only did it burn the wet wood, soaked wood, which shouldn't have been able to do, it burned up the stones.
The stones and the dust.
Vinny, you being an outdoorsman, have you ever seen a stone being burned to that extent?
I haven't cooked a whole lot of stones.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
I mean, what? I mean,
It's not a thing.
like literally though. I mean, that would be molten,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the only. But even would lava consume a stone like that?
But it doesn't
Yeah.
just say, it doesn't say consumed. It says consumed. It didn't say melted. It says consumed.
Yeah, lava just melts the stone and it turns into melted stone.
Yeah, right.
Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stone, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. I wonder what that looked like. The fire
It's probably really, really hot.
Like a
licked up,
laser.
licked up, though.
You know what's actually fascinating? Because that would take an immense amount of energy to essentially vaporize
A
stone.
laser.
What's fascinating is not that he was able to do that. Is that he was able to do that and not crack the earth in half. Or kill everybody in the
Yeah,
vicinity.
it just took the dust, but it didn't.
It took everything just in that area. Everyone standing around, including Elijah, who is ostensibly very close to this.
It's like a
is
lightsaber
fine.
came down from heaven.
Like,
No,
yes,
even
exactly.
even more than that, because the only thing we have close to that is an explosion from an atom bomb that turns sand to glass, which doesn't consume it; it just changes its nature. This goes well beyond that.
It's fascinating.
Do you, like
It's fire from heaven, man.
fire from heaven? I mean, this is a story that goes beyond the physical nature of what we've been able to achieve.
It should be noted that this is not the only time that we have fire coming down from heaven. Fire comes down from heaven to consume,
Sodom and Gomorrah.
well, Sodom and Gomorrah. But we also have fire coming down with Solomon's temple. When the dedication of Solomon's temple, fire came down from heaven. I want to say that the consummation of the tabernacle also had fire coming down from heaven. I'm pretty sure with Aaron and Moses, Leviticus, middle of Leviticus.
I guess you consider the pillar of fire in the evening time with the Israelites.
And then you could also talk about Pentecost.
Yeah.
And fire coming from heaven.
And then in the future, at the end of the world,
Oh yeah, the two witnesses can call fire from heaven.
Now, when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces. And they said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape." So they seized them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and executed them there. That's kind of the part of the story that I don't know if it made the cartoon Bible VHS version. It's part of the story that I guarantee you doesn't make the felt board version. It's kind of like with David and Goliath. You know, every like kid rendition of David and Goliath, you get David throwing the stone, hitting Goliath, killing Goliath. But you don't often get then David running up, taking the sword and cutting Goliath's head off, and then running around with it. You know.
It should.
It should, though. This is also one of those instances where it's like, no fire coming down, consuming Baal's offering. Fire consuming the Lord's. The people moved. And Elijah's saying, seize these false prophets. 450. And he executes them. Now keep in mind that this is not like, hey, like an easy execution. Like there's no like mass execution methods at this point. It's Elijah with a sword or a dagger of some kind, one after another, cutting throats, spilling blood, carting bodies away. Like this is the man of the Lord, and he's addressing sin. He's confronting idolatry. He's calling to account those that promote it, propagate it, deceive the people.
Well, I think that's the distinguishing fact of that is that they are promoting it towards the people. And so what does that say for the modern day false prophets? Because that's essentially what they are. If you're not a prophet of God, a legitimate prophet of God, you are a false prophet if you're propagating something other than that.
John made the comment that when fire came down from heaven, there would have been singed eyebrows all around. That's the other thing. Like, how is no one else consumed, you know?
Well, I mean,
Complete control.
I mean, what else would you do if you saw something like that? You would fall to the ground too. Like, what have I done? What have I followed? I mean, that'd be enough to scare just about anybody.
Let me finish the story real quick. Finish out the chapter. Then Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of abundance of rain." So Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he bowed down on the ground, and he put his face between his knees, and said to his servant, "Go up now, look towards the sea." So he went up and looked, and said, "There's nothing." 7 times he said, "Go again." So it came to pass the 7th time that he said, "There is a cloud, as small as a man's hand, rising out of the sea." So he said, "Go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot, and go down before the rain stops you." Now it happened in the meantime, the sky became black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy rain. So Ahab rode away and went to Jezreel. Then the hand of the Lord came upon Elijah. He girded up his loins, and he ran ahead of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. And then you'd have to just read more of the story here, because it continues on. But I think isn't it interesting that 450 prophets of Baal get judged, right? But Ahab isn't. He's there for the whole thing. You kind of have to wonder why. Why isn't Ahab judged? Why isn't he executed? I mean, he's the one that's allowed the idolatry into the land. He's the one that has allowed Jezebel to have her way. I mean, he's the authority, isn't he? And yet he seems to get a pass. Any thoughts on why that might be?
I'm more wondering about why Jezebel wasn't executed with the prophets of Baal.
I don't think she's present.
But like she was the catalyst for it.
Well, she will face her end in due time. But Ahab, why is Ahab given a pass in the scene? It's a thought I've never had with the story.
I feel like God shows mercy to those that are deceived.
Maybe.
That
Like, a lot
maybe
of
it was Ahab, the people are turning. You can turn as well.
Yeah.
And be Israel's first good king.
Yeah.
First and only. And things won't go south for you, and later on your country won't be destroyed by the Assyrians, and we have a very different Israel.
So you have to ask yourself, the cook-off, who is it for? The entire display. Who is the intended audience? Now, no doubt, the children of Israel are present. There's a crowd there. Without a doubt, the prophets of Baal got a lesson. An
education, if you will.
On how to cook barbecue. But like, the whole context of the story, beginning of the chapter, the word of the Lord came to Elijah to tell Ahab that there would be rain. So there had been a famine, and that famine had been the judgment of God. And it was destroying things. It was heavy, it was hard. And Elijah is to bring a message to Ahab. There's going to be rain. God's going to water the earth. God's going to take care of his people. Ahab has gone into idolatry. Ahab has been led astray. Jezebel, that harlot, has led him down a path of wickedness apart from God. Like, the whole setting up this cook-off was to reinforce or illustrate primarily to Ahab what? God's real and these gods aren't. Like, Ahab, wake up. Like, your decisions are having consequences on the nation that you reign. But look how silly this is. These 450 prophets of this false god are cutting themselves, spending all day crying out, and nothing. And Elijah, I think, what is it? Who's listening when Elijah's mocking?
Ahab.
It's Ahab. Ahab is the audience. Which is why when all of this happens and Elijah kills all these men, who does the word go to? We're back to Ahab. Yo, bro. What are you doing? Can you not have a greater demonstration of reality? But Ahab, I mean, does it change anything? No. No, it doesn't at all. I want to pivot slightly. Yeah, Craig.
My mom made a really good point
Yeah.
in the comments.
Yeah.
And just before, as we're transitioning, she says that Elijah only prayed once for the fire, but 7 times for the rain. There is no set pattern for God to respond to our requests. He is sovereign. Which I think is a really cool point, because there are 2 very different responses from God to those 2 things, but they were both ultimately, yes, I will do that thing. I think it's really cool.
The Spice Daddy walked right in front of
Right
your
in front of my.
camera.
I haven't been on camera the entire time, but right then, yeah.
No, I mean, can you imagine being Elijah, and like you pray once, fire comes down from heaven, and then like the whole rain thing, and you're like, you keep sitting. Hey, see if there's a cloud. That buddy, I did nothing. 7 times, right?
It's like, this thing on?
Yeah.
It's like, Lord, where are you? What are you doing? But then it rains. I do think, it's interesting. And I don't exactly know where I want to land on this. Vinny, you might be able to help me with it. But we live in a very wussified Christianity, where we don't want to offend, like in the name of evangelism, in the name of reaching the lost. We don't want to speak truth. We don't want to be hard. We don't want to like you look at the way that like the prophets operated. Look at like Elijah in this story. Like Elijah is openly making fun of these people that are promoting what is a cancer. These people that are out there teaching and pushing a distorted gospel, a false religion, something antithetical to God. Not only does Elijah stand actively, almost even militantly, against them.
Almost?
Well, he does because he kills them, and we're not going to go necessarily that far. But, like, he has no problems mocking them. And, like, there's so much going on in our culture that is just as destructive and just as rooted in falsehood. And, like, even you read about, like, they're cutting themselves and self-mutilation. And we have people self-mutilating in rebellion against God and God's established order. And we're so like, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. When it's like, you know what? Maybe it's not about their feelings anymore, and they should be openly mocked for the lunacy that's being promoted. Like, maybe we shouldn't be so touchy-feely with people's emotions, because that's not helping.
No.
Like, that strategy the last 10 years has failed. I'm not saying being a jerk for Jesus, but you know what I mean? Let me
I
throw
know
it to you,
exactly
Vinny.
what you mean, and I'm living it in real time, as you know, with my very dear friend Joe, and it's a lot of times the other side of it where he's, you know, we get into these discussions on my deck, and I know he's searching for something, and I'm super happy to be a part of his spiritual walk and whatever he's going through, but there's times where he gets a little where he's trying to mock my faith, like I'm weak and I need to believe in something, and that's pathetic. But at the same time, as my friend, he thinks I'm one of the craziest, toughest, weirdest, dumbest dudes on earth, because I'll get hurt really bad and I won't go to the hospital, and it works out. So in one sense, he's like, man, you're like the baddest dude I know. But then when we get into our spiritual conversations, he's almost trying to mock me and make fun of me and say I have to have this thing to fall back on. And I'm like, you don't get to challenge my faith, dude. Like, you can challenge anything you want. You can tell me I'm not a good cowboy when we're herding cattle. You can tell me I'm not the best lumberjack when I'm cutting down a tree. You can tell me I don't know how to make a fire. I can prove you wrong in all those things. But the one thing you don't get to tell me is that my faith is fake, or that my faith is placed haphazardly, or that my faith is my weakness, that I have to have something to believe in. You've heard my testimony. You know where my faith comes from. I don't get to deny what I went through, as my faith was built with God, through God, in God. And it's comical to me, and I will make him look stupid in those conversations, because it's the dumbest argument.
I'll give you an example. So, Christians will get ridiculed, mocked for our positions on the origins of the universe. Oh, you're just going to cop out and believe that there's a God that made everything? You know, you're going to deny science and the reality of what we see in the natural world? You're going to hold on to your fairy tale belief and some higher power, et cetera, and openly mock and make fun of and laugh at. And like Christians like shirk back and like get all wigged out about it and defensive, when it's like we should be on the offensive, like, hey, that doesn't sound nearly as stupid as what you believe, that there is no God and everything is random, and like you are the descendant of some primordial goo.
Yeah, you're literally arguing that your life has no purpose.
I mean, like at some point, it's like, you know, we should make fun of you.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you know what? You're gonna make fun of me, and that's fine. You can do it, but I'm gonna make fun of you because you're stupid. Like, you're gonna call me anti-scientific. I'm gonna say your science is absolutely asinine.
If that was the facts, and
Elijah openly mocks the prophets of Baal.
Yeah, like if that was the facts, we should all just go off ourselves, because we have no purpose. Like, we are primordial goo. Like, then what is our purpose on this planet? But following Jesus gives us purpose. We are going out and saving souls for eternity. Tell me a better purpose.
Right.
There isn't one.
Yeah.
There isn't one. You can make all the money in the world, And when you're dead, you're gone.
They want to make fun of me because I believe that there are two genders. And I'm the one that's supposed to be offended by that?
And that's not the
Like,
reason why I want to make fun
I'm
of
the
you.
stupid person? I'm the one being made fun of? You pull up some furry videos. Who's the stupid people that should be mocked and laughed at? Because coddling, like, again, I think we need more prophets in America, like Elijah, that are willing to stand up and say, that's stupid. Where's your God? Is he on the toilet? Where's the power in your God? Are you happy? Are you content?
No, they're miserable.
We're always on the defense. We get made fun of, and I think Elijah would step into like the modern church and be like, "Oh my goodness, there's so much material. Let's take this on the road." He'd be a big fan of Babylon B. I'm sure of it.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
But you know, again, Jesus was that way too. I mean, Jesus didn't tiptoe around things.
My favorite story is Jesus and the woman at the well. She's like, yeah, I'm not married. And he's like, yeah, or you've been married this many times before, and you're not married to the guy you're living with now. Like, that was a very sarcastic statement.
But true.
Right.
And it cut deep. Mm-hmm. You know, he complimented Peter, and then he said, Satan, get behind me. You know, the only guy to go for, like, Peter is the guy with nicknames. Real name Simon. He gets called Peter Rock. He gets called Little Faither.
Now I'm kind of worried about the name.
He gets called Satan.
Now I'm kind of worried about the name that Jesus is going to give me and when I get to heaven.
It's Spice Daddy.
I hope so.
Yeah. You're going to get to heaven, and Jesus is going to be like, I had a different name, but Spice Daddy just fits.
I'll be like, yes.
Anyway, you know, I maybe to close out things, to tie it back to Pentecost, which I think is an apt, you know, fire. You know, we know that the altar was the sacrifice and the altar was acceptable to God. Why? Because God's fire was poured on it. Baal was rejected because there was no fire. Our lives are consecrated by fire, meaning that when the Holy Spirit is poured upon us, it's not just for empowering, it's for approval. It's God approving the sacrifice that was made for us.
Can we kind of go back to what I asked before about the parallels between Moses? Why did God allow the black magic to happen and not the prophets of Baal for that to happen?
Well, again, you know, you go back to the story of Moses and the prophets or the priests of Pharaoh. What happened? Well, Moses' serpent ate theirs.
Right.
Like it wasn't that God has power and that Satan doesn't. No, Satan has power. It's that God's power is so much greater. That's what was
right.
And Satan's power has to be relevant for God's power to
And
overcome.
I think where you see in this story with Elijah is that God did not allow Satan to show his power during this time.
And we have no example of Satan having authority to rain fire from anywhere.
True.
Like, there's no example of that. Because, again, fire from heaven, and that's why Elijah sets the scene the way he does. Elijah knows that only God can rain fire from heaven. That it's kind of like God's
Signature.
It's his signature way of demonstrating approval for all the examples that we gave earlier. Satan would not have been given any authority to do that. Was there black arts in Cana within the prophets of Baal? Sure. But at the same token, the power of God always superseded, trumped, you know, the power of darkness.
I'll even bring that back to real life. Like, when I was in my 20s, I struggled really hard with letting God work in my life. Like, I was such a hard worker. Everybody told me I was such a hard worker that I could only be successful. And I worked and I worked and I worked. And I started my own company when I was 20 years old. And I ran that company successfully for 5 years. And I was not at any point in that trusting God. I got up every day and I worked a 14 to 20 hour day, and I was only trusting in my own ability for my success. And the economy tanked. I lost everything. And one of my employees, his wife was a self-proclaimed witch. And the day that I had to lay him off, all my employees off, the day that big bank bailouts happened, all my super wealthy customers weren't building $10 million vacation homes in northern Idaho anymore. The day I lost everything, she said, I'm going to curse you and you will live in poverty, because we're going to live in poverty. And I lived in poverty for a decade, no matter how hard I worked. And it wasn't until 5 years into living in poverty, not only in poverty, I was so broke, and I owed the IRS $135,000 because I didn't file some paperwork properly for taxes the last year I was in business. And so it was a whole thing. But it was God being just as big of a smart aleck as Elijah was in this story. Like, you tried to do this without me, and you didn't trust me to be a part of it. And so now I'm a part of it. And I'm going to let you believe that this crazy lady says she's a witch and she cursed you and you're living in poverty. That's God. That's God making an example of my idiot self not having faith in God. And then I finally, it's like you finally get to that point where you feel sorry for yourself. Like, God, what did I do to let this happen? And then that's when God yelled in my ear and said, you didn't let me work. And it was terrifying. And that evening I was having that pity party and feeling sorry for myself, and God yelled at me. It was not like oh, God talked to me and it was fun. It was terrifying. I stayed up all night because I was scared to go to bed. And then over the course of the next 5 years of my life, I gave it all up to God. 100%. Everything. Every aspect of my life. To the stupidest things that I could tell you guys, and you would laugh at me. Like I would be taking my vitamins in the morning, and I was like, take 2, and then like 3 would fall out, and I'd be like, well, God, you know what my body needs. I don't, so I'd take 3. I mean, gave up every aspect of my life to the most mundane details, and now we're seeing God work.
Yeah, the Lord's blessing.
He's blessing myself, my family, but it was 5 years of punishment. And then another 5 years of, okay, you said you trust me. Do you really trust me? That's what these stories are. It's real things that happen. And why did God let him get away scot-free? It's his lesson. That was his life's lesson.
Yeah, Ahab in that moment.
We don't know what happened in his heart. It doesn't go into detail. We don't know what happened when he got back to his palace. But I've lived this story on a much smaller scale. But we all do.
Yeah.
We all have to live this story, because it is really hard to give up and realize you're not good enough to have control of this life. It's really hard, even as a Christian, to let it all go to God. But when you do, and you actually let him work, holy cow, what a miracle.
Well, I think that
what an amazing power.
I think that goes back to the character of God, like where he says, I know the plans I have for you. I knew you before you were even formed in the womb. Like, that's not just a saying of a general statement. Like, he knew what Ahab needed in that moment. He knew what you had in that moment, what you needed in that moment. And every person is individually different in the way God approaches that.
100%.
And that says to me more than just about anything is that, like, God cares for you as an individual, not just as a human being in general. Like, he doesn't care for you just as a general, oh, I love my creation. No, he cares about you as an individual and knows you and knows what you need and what you need at that, not just in general, but at that very moment. So he knew that Ahab needed to see that his gods at that moment were being mocked and couldn't do anything about it.
Most likely to his pride.
Right.
He was so proud and so stubborn, it took every ounce of that story to break that down.
Right. And that kind of goes back to the like, for like me or for you, you know, we kind of look at other people and we look at them and like, why are you being successful and why am I not? Why am I being successful and this guy is not? It's because that's what I need at this moment, because God has established that. Because he knows me as an individual and knows what I need. He doesn't know what just I need, like me as like an American male from the southern United States needs. He knows what me as Justin, as Spice Daddy, knows. Like, he knows what hot sauce I need for this food at this moment in time. Like, and that says to me more than anything, because that's a personal thing. It's not just oh, I love you as a king. That's like, I know you as a father, and I know you as my creation, and it's not just a general creation thing. It's like, I formed you and you are my masterpiece, and I know what you need as my masterpiece.
You have to also acknowledge, and we really just kind of scratched the surface with the story, you know, just the incredible faith that Elijah demonstrated. Faith in God, confidence in his calling, trust in God's word and what was revealed to him. I mean, the dude does some ballsy things in this story. You got to make sure that God's behind you and that you're really hearing from God, you know, before you start digging a water trough around your sacrifice. You know what I mean? Like, the faith is amazing. We got a text from our buddy Tom. Said it was a great show, one of his favorite stories in the Bible, which is awesome. Creighton, anything on the interwebs on your end of it?
Both Karen and Miss Ann say hey. This would be Justin's second favorite Karen, and Miss Ann say hey.
Wonderful.
That's about all we got.
Well, we're out of time.
Did we just record a perfect episode?
It seems
far.
that way.
Almost,
I
but
feel like we just recorded.
almost
Almost.
perfect. But I forgot that Creighton had switched the cameras around on the screen, so I got out at an imperfect time to use the restroom, and I apologize thoroughly for that.
There was a yellow blur that just moved right by the screen.
For like the past 3 years or however long we've been doing this, like, the screen that's currently on,
I know he's
is on
moved
one
things
side.
around. I'm with you.
And so I was looking at that. I was like, "Oh, Zach's on right now. I can safely get by the camera without it showing me." I was wrong.
All right, I'm hitting some music. Creighton, you good?
Good to go.
All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight with the Outlaw Radio Show. If you're watching the live stream, thank you so much for being with us. Check out the podcast. What you've been watching, the audio gets released as a podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasting. You can download it, listen, pass it along, share it on your social media, leave a review. We always appreciate that. If you're listening and have never joined us on the live stream, Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, we go live. Again, Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, outlawradio.live is our YouTube channel. Facebook.com/TheRadio Outlaw is our stream on Facebook. You can get all that information at outlawradio.org. Again, next Wednesday, May 29th, will be our last episode before our summer hiatus. And so be sure to join us next week. God bless.